Welcome to I Write Out Loud. This is my home for creative nonfiction. It is my audacious act of rebellion saying that creativity is important and has power, and that we need to be continuing to create our art even in these very trying political times. After a year of feeling pretty squelched about writing and sharing my memoir writing because the world had more important things to worry about, I'm 180ing. I'm doing a 180 and saying, actually, no. This administration has taken so much from us. You know what? Adjusting my screen here. Fuck all of that. We all need to be living audaciously and sharing our art and work. And so that's what this space is. I Write Out Loud. It is a home for my creative nonfiction. It is both an archive of the work I have done in the past so that it will all live on in one beautiful curated space. And it is also where I post my new work. This week is week 2. So this is episode number 8. Those of you who have been here for a while know that 8s are my favorite number. You're going to hear me repeat 8s during this. So that this is episode 8 is significant. That makes it week 2 because I'm posting every day during the week. And I have dubbed this week Origin Week. I have realized that I have some stories that are my origin stories, even if I didn't know at the time when I was writing them that they would go on to become so much more. So I shared my relationship origin story yesterday, which is called I Had a Little Our Relationship. The day before that, I shared my parenting gender non-conforming kids story, origin story, which is called What to Expect When You Weren't Expecting a Gender Non-Conforming Child. And today, this is the origin story of when I first wrote about my fraught and evolving relationship with my father, who now has dementia. And the story, let me grab the link here. I bet Karen has it too, because Karen Marie Shelton is awesome and is the amazing moderator here and on the Daily Whatever Show. This is the story we'll be talking about today, and it is called My Father is Much More Likeable Now That He Has Dementia. And in the image, I've subtitled it, Not the Dad I Had. He was not the dad I wanted to have, but he is the dad that I got. It's kind of one of the primary themes in this story. So we're all here. I may just jump in, but I will first do a small pitch because I always do that everything, everywhere in the I Write Out Loud project will always be in front of the paywall. It is, I want to share these stories. As I'm bringing them over or I'm writing new ones, I'm being very careful with the design. They all have a very consistent look and feel. I am recording. I'm doing bespoke recordings in my own voice for each and every story. I don't want AI being where people get to hear the story. I want you all to hear it in my voice as I intended to share it. It is absolutely a labor of love, and it is also an immense amount of work. It is work I love. But if you would like to and have the ability to support my work, I am going to put a link in here to my subscribe page. I have discounted memberships 20%. I plan to leave them there for quite some time. But it is $4 a month or $40 a year to support this project. And if you are feeling especially generous, it is $88 to become a founding member. And I do have a few small perks in addition to the content that's available to everyone. The written stories, my audio of the stories, and these lives daily to go along with the stories. I host a weekly recap on Sundays where I spill the tea and give a bit more backstory, both into the creative process and the what else was going on behind the scenes in my life for the stories for the preceding week. And I also, we had the first one on Sunday. It was super fun. It was an intimate gathering. I loved it. And you all helped me choose the creative direction for the following week, which is Origin Stories. So I really appreciate that. And if you come on board as a paid or as a founding member, you get to come to those behind the scenes, spill the tea calls, and help guide the direction of where this goes forward. You also just get to know that you are contributing to my act of audacious rebellion, and I would be immensely grateful. Also, just signing up as a free subscriber, hugely important. I appreciate whatever support you can lend. I'm just immensely grateful that you are all here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, and founding members get a 30-minute session with me. So we can talk about writing, editing, building your Substack, taking over the government, review online dating profiles, drink tea and coffee, and just chit chat, whatever you wish. That's at the founding member level. Okay. Now that I have gotten through all of that, I would love to dive into this story with you. I'm so excited about it. And I am opening up my notes that I have here. I have to refresh them. Okay. Here they are. I like having them here so that I don't forget to say anything. Um, and okay, so I'm going to jump in here. This story is called My Father is Much More Likeable Now That He Has Dementia. One thing you may notice looking at this page, two things you may notice. It no longer has the big recording at the top with the banner across it that made it show like a recording on my landing page and when I would share it. Substack changed the tool and it's better now. You just get to see the image as I created it. That means I might have to go back and redo the first 7 because it looks so much better. But I do like the way this looks. And you also may see that there is a photo of my father when he is much younger. He's 81 now. There's photos of him further down. You can see more what he looks like now. But look how happy my dad looks in this photo, and look how much like me. I look a lot like him, I think. That's not necessarily a good thing. My mom is very beautiful, but my coloring is very much my dad, and the resemblance is there. And I had never seen this photo until I went home to his home in Florida almost 3 years ago. Or was it almost 4 years ago? Losing track. It's in the story. When my stepmom died, this is the photo of him she had on her desk. And I was like, that is a great photo. I don't know that I have no memories of him smiling quite like that. So I love it. So let me give some background of the story and how it was written, because I do think it's fascinating. And it says, your dad went to University of Georgia. He was a Bulldog. Yes, it is still an immense source of pride for him that he went to University of Georgia and was there when Herschel Walker, or no, maybe he wasn't there when Herschel Walker was, but he's a big fan and still watches them play college football and loves it and all of that. So this story, originally published in July of 2023, I think I have the date down here. Let me just look. It was, June 16th, 2023. I joined Medium and started writing at the end of April. So this was I was quite new to memoir writing still when I wrote this. And this was the first story, I think, that came to me in a flash. And the flash that came to me is the opening scene. And I was commuting home from work and I was on the bus that day. I didn't drive. And I typed that out on my thumbs on the bus in that Medium app. And it was the first time that I was like overcome with a narrative I wanted to share. And it's describing my 10th birthday party sleepover, the opening of the story, and how we had this big kind of open living room in my house at the time. And I think I must have had a dozen or so friends over, for sleepover, which is very exciting. And we did seances and we, giggled and had snacks and did all the things 10-year-old girls like to do. And sometime in the middle of the night, my dad got woken up and was very displeased to have been woken up and just came out in his tidy whities with his comb over, flapping everywhere, and screamed at us and separated us. And that was the end of the fun of my party. And we all just slept and went home the next day. I hadn't thought about that in decades, but it came to me in this flash. And it was very much adult Dana, who is now a mom myself, thinking about that memory with the wisdom of years and being like, how did he expect a bunch of 10-year-old girls having a sleepover to be quiet? And how did I have no recollection of sharing that story with talking about it afterwards with my friends. I know once he separated us, we didn't say peep. We were all too scared. And my cord is tangled on my foot there. Sorry. I never processed this. It just happened and I moved on. And I can't really remember what 10-year-old me felt, but I must have been humiliated, right? Um, so it's not explicitly stated in the story, but I hope that the subtext in the opening paragraph or opening section, as I'm detailing this, is what a way to grow up with a father expecting silence out of 10-year-olds and having no qualms with walking in on his eldest daughter's birthday party in an utter state of like mostly undressed, first of all. Like literally, I think he was just in his tidy whities. And he's a very big, hairy guy. And just yelling at a bunch of 10-year-old girls. Like, if my daughters came home and told me that had happened to them, I would be horrified. And I would be on the phone with those parents and be like, what the hell do you think you're doing? And this story is adult parental maternal Dana doing that on my own behalf. What the hell was he doing to me? Even as I couldn't process it then. I am guessing, and I'm going to take questions and comments and read the chat more when I'm done walking through the story. If I try to keep track of both, I fear I will not be able to do that because this one's it's pretty emotional for me, and I would imagine it's pretty emotional for a lot of you. I think many of us have fraught relationships with one or both of our parents, and I have joked before, though I mean it, it's not really a joke, that most of the amazing women I know had really shitty dads in one form or another. And I hope that this essay doesn't paint my father as a monster because he's not a monster. But he was a very difficult man to have as a father for someone like me, and he is not the father I wanted to have. Of course, that shaped the trajectory of who I became, and I can't undo that. I can also recognize, and I hope it comes through in this story, that I do believe he loved and loves me still. And in some ways, he did the best he could, and that he is, even though that in some ways was not very much. And I think he's a product of his generation, right? Especially men who are, you know what? He's not quite a baby boomer. He was born in 1944. So he is the very tail end of the silent generation / early boomer. And men in that age group, like they didn't get therapy. They didn't go on medication to manage their anger. They thought they had a right to subjugate and yell and be racist and misogynist and all of the other ists. So that's my dad. So the story opens, and this is important to remember, it opens with him disrupting my 10th birthday party, yelling at all of us, humiliating me, probably traumatizing all of my friends who I asked when I first published this, the friends who I still know were like, of course I remember that night. We all remember it. But then it significantly ends with him sending me to my room. I got sent to my own bedroom with like one or two other people, and everyone else got scattered other places in the house. And the story goes on from there to talk about how meek my mother, brother, and I were in the hurricane of my father's presence, the darkness, the storm of my dad in our home growing up. I will probably I'll read a section of this in a little bit, but it details kind of how I ended up considering in young adulthood, like you could cut your father off. He is a hard person to know. And I opted not to do that. And I have no regrets about that decision. I am glad I still have a relationship with him. But the path forward that I took was space and distance. I live 3,000 miles away from him. I, through the years, have not and still do not speak to him very regularly, just enough to be like, hey, Dad, maybe a visit every couple of years or every year. Throughout the years, there'll be a shift in recent history as his dementia came in, but I'll get to that next. But I call it benign neglect of just like putting it over here. If we were ever on a call and he started acting up, it would just be like, peace out, goodbye. I did not let that energy be anywhere near me. He and his wife, now late wife, were super Trumpy supporters. They would call or email me with crap, and I'd be like, I do not want to hear this. I think you're completely wrong. I'm not here to change your mind, but don't come at me with this crap. was pretty much my attitude. And it worked, and it was a survival strategy to keep the relationship intact, but extremely limited. And I'm one of two kids. I have a younger brother. And I knew as the daughter that if things fell apart, that the emotional burden could fall to me. The caregiving burden could fall to me. And I never wanted that burden. And that's a theme that runs through this story as well. And so then there's a shift in my dad. Um, for many years, in our infrequent phone calls and when I would see him and when I talked to my brother about him, it was clear that he was in some cognitive decline. And his wife had MS. She's a lot younger than him. She's kind of midpoint between my age and his. And so she was in physical decline. And they had I think that they had what for them, they were content together. But for me, like they yelled at each other all the time. And it was never a relationship I could live with. But they sort of had a stasis, and her 90-something-year-old mom lived with them by the end and was also one of the she was in the best shape of the three of them. But my brother and I knew that it was a triumvirate that would fall apart. One of them was going to go down from a health perspective. And the person who went down was my stepmom. She passed away suddenly. I mean, it wasn't super suddenly. She had MS. She wasn't doing well. But the actual death came as a complete surprise. And that was hold on, it was June 20th, 2022. So this year will be 4 years since she passed. I'm starting to lose track of time. I don't know if anyone else feels that with the pandemic, especially like my sense of time is completely borked. So I woke up to a text from her caregiver that was just like, Ruth died. And I was like, oh, fuck. Now what happens? So I flew to Florida as quickly as I could, which it took me a day and a half until I arrived because it took a day to get the flight. And then, of course, it was an overnight flight. I do not sleep on red eyes. So I arrived on about an hour's sleep and then drove an hour and a half to the funeral, which was probably not a very safe way to drive the South Florida highways. But there we were. And just to make it extra spicy, my dad had COVID, as did my stepmom's mom. The nurse practitioner who my brother and I had hired, who would intermittently go check on them, she's certain that my stepmom died of COVID, even though it's not on her birth certificate. That she thinks that was the comorbidity that she died in her sleep, but she, heart failure. And that's, I guess, common if people are compromised, that COVID can do that. And the fact that the other two folks in her home had it does make it a pretty safe conclusion. So here I am sitting behind my father trying to console him at the funeral, and he's raging and he's coughing and has masks on, but I'm praying that the spittle, I come behind him so I'm not in the line of fire of his spittle because he has COVID. And I have a week to find my father a memory care center because he is in the home. Ruth's aide stayed and gave some care, and her mother was there, but my dad and Ruth's mom he yelled at her a lot. He was really jealous of their relationship, I think, and just it was not great. Let's just say that. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And so I immediately started going on memory care tours. And so in the story, I describe how it was this blur of having to figure out where my dad is going to go next, right? And I skipped one big scene in here, and I'm gonna go back, and I think I'm gonna read this part out loud because this is one of my favorite parts of the story. I did go. So my stepmother died in June. I flew back with my kids in February, just like I'm going to be there next week. And at the time, he was still living at home with his wife, who was deteriorating, but still hanging in there. And my dad, I think part of the reason he declined so quickly at the house was that there was nothing there to stimulate him. He was trapped at home watching TV with their blind, diabetic, fractious, incontinent 12-year-old dog named Woody. Remember him. We're going to come back to him. And he was just sort of languishing, right? And I didn't realize how bad it was. And I had said, when I come down there, we're going to go out for a steak dinner. We're going to go to Runyon's, which is like the old school fancy prime rib and steakhouse where I grew up. And so we went and we picked him up, and he could barely manage his rollator to get to the car. And like I said, he's a very big man, so I cannot help him if he falls. But my two daughters and I get him to the restaurant, and he is a panicked mess and weepy. And I'm going to read this section to you because I think it will describe what it was like more than me just explaining it to you. So this is the part that I will read. Here we go. As his cognitive status declined, so did his anger. During our infrequent calls, I could see the gaps in his memory. He'd repeat himself, he'd space out. I also noticed he didn't sound angry or aggressive anymore. He sounded grateful to hear from me. I noticed new characteristics had emerged: timidity, insecurity, worry. I flew out to check on him in early 2022. I'd promised to take him to his favorite steakhouse with my kids. He could barely navigate the path to the car with his rollator, and he was so anxious. He sat in the front seat of the car, panicked. "Where's my wife?" he asked over and over. Is she mad? Did I do something wrong?" It took constant reassurance and the promise of prime rib to calm him enough to get to the restaurant. He asked to call his wife every few minutes or so for most of the meal. This was a side to my dad I'd never seen. I'd learned how to manage his verbal abuse, his oppressive moods. I was at a bit of a loss for how to manage a fretful father. Looking to distract him, I pointed out the song playing and asked if he recognized it. He fumbled through the lyrics, and even as he couldn't recall the name of the artist or the song, he wept as he claimed he loved it. I'll never forget his expression, or the looks I exchanged with my daughters, as he sort of sang along with the lyrics of Elton John, tears streaming down his face. I sang along to help him out. The words she knows, the tune he hums. This formerly angry, explosive man who'd oppressed and silenced me throughout my childhood was a wounded, fragile husk, a tiny dancer in my hand, at least until the prime rib showed up. So it's hard to emphasize just how much I'd never seen my dad be so scared that he'd done something wrong, that there was this little wounded boy who I now see every time I see him, now that his dementia has progressed. But this was really my first seeing of the immense anxiety that he was dealing with, because the bravado, the angry, yelly person who he was his whole life, at least with me, was protecting this little boy. And in dementia, that little boy was coming forward and taking the lead. If you look at the story, if you guys are following along in the article, you can see a photo of my father back in 2022, looking really good because he's deteriorated some since then. You should see the size of the prime rib he's eating. It's like, I don't even know how big it is. It's immense. I'm going to put the link in the chat because he was so elated and he devoured the entire thing. I mean, my dad loves food. First and foremost, you should all know how much my dad loves food. So that was an interesting part of the story. That was in February, and then in June, his wife died, and I fly out there. I need to figure out where he is going. I'm sorting through all of the papers in his wife's office because she did all of that, the load of running the home. They've been there for 35 plus years. It's an immense disrepair. The house, the papers, all of it. And I need to find him a place to live, and I need to rehome this dog. It was a huge whirlwind, and I toured a bunch of memory care centers, and I found one that I was like, this is a good place for my dad, because they had a unit that's particularly for people like him who have dementia and who need to be in a locked unit, but who are not like catatonic in their chairs. A lot of the people in the unit are either walking around or they're at least up and alert in their wheelchairs for a good part of the day. They had more activities that were appropriate for him. So I was like, great, this is the place. What they don't tell you, what I didn't realize was like, it was effectively like renting an apartment. I had to buy everything, even though the place costs, I think, $6,000 or $7,000 a month. Like, I have to send toilet paper there and soap and and his pull-ups and all the things he needs. He doesn't get any of that for that amount of money. And I had to furnish the place. It needed a bed and linens and towels and a TV and furniture. And some of it I got from his home, but I got a new bed and new blankets and things. And I printed out photos and I just made the room look cozy and nice because I wanted that for him, right? Then the trick was how to get him there and how to get him to willingly go in and then trick him into staying, because there was no way I was going to say, "Hey, Dad, we're going to pack up and leave your house and you're going to go live in a memory care center now. Let's go." There's no way. Like, he never would have come. And so I talked to Rachel, who is this nurse I mentioned earlier, who is really the superhero of this day. And this is where the story gets really interesting. And I'm going to read some of this out loud again, because I think the way it's written here is the proper way to tell it. And then I'll give a little backstory. So indulge me while I read again. He was distraught. He had COVID and he had no plan. Hold on a moment. Let me just make sure that's where I want to start. Actually, I'm going to start slightly further down. My dad and his wife had lived in that house for 30 years, had barely left it for years. It was in as much disrepair as he was. They had a blind, diabetic, incontinent, fractious 12-year-old dog who also never left. Everything about the house and its remaining occupants was stagnant. And it was my job to uproot it all in about a week. The burden I never wanted. The days passed in a whirlwind of memory care facility tours, tax forms, estate plans, home repairs, phone calls, medical forms, furniture shopping, all while trying to rehome the dog, prepare his new home, and finally figure out how to get him actually into the building. I knew he wouldn't come willingly. His nurse, Rachel, and I made a plan to take him there for lunch. Dad is highly food motivated, so he eagerly agreed. I was terrified of what would happen once he realized he was never going to leave. Then, as we sat in the memory care unit, him happily eating his way through multiple tuna melts, the most amazing thing happened. He looked around and said, "This place is nice." He stopped a few people walking by in the hallway and asked, "Hey, do you like living here? Is the food good?" The residents were gracious. He turned to Rachel and me and said, I don't think my wife is going to make it. If she dies, do you think I could live here?" Rachel and I exchanged looks, astonished. She answered, "I'm sure you could." Then she turned to the nurse on duty and said, "Do you have a room this gentleman could see? He's interested in living here." The nurse played along. "Of course," she said. "Go see room 132. The brain is a wild ride, the convolutions it will take when integrating a new reality over an old one. We helped my dad walk down the hall to his room. I'd painstakingly arranged it to look welcoming, with all new bedding, a fancy TV, and loads of family photos. I couldn't believe how perfectly the admission day was progressing so far. Then he walked into the room, took one look at it, and completely lost his mind. Somehow, once my dad realized the room was for him, his brain took another wild pivot, this time into terror, and his anger returned with a vengeance. And he yelled them at me. He unleashed a string of obscenities like I've never heard, and he yelled them at me. "I hate this fucking place. You're my daughter. I order you to do what I say. Get me out of this fucking place." And finally, "I hate you." Suddenly, I'm 10 years old again, and my dad is angry, and he's yelling at me. Only this time, he can't send me to my room and take away my friends. I'm sending him to his room, and I've taken him away from his home, his dog, his life. I I might be the one in control this time, but also I'm walloped by the enormity of the decision I've made for him, and no one has yelled at me like this in decades, since my childhood, and only he has done it ever. I freeze. Rachel intervenes and tells me to step outside the room. "Get me out of this fucking place! I will hit you!" I hear him yell at Rachel. "No, you won't," she tells him. She's petite, but she's mighty, and she gets right in his face without fear. "You won't hit me because that's not the man you are. Now stop yelling and sit down." She turns and tells me to wait outside. I leave, my dad's obscenities blazing in my ears as I head to the exit. I wish it were different. I wish I had the kind of dad I could welcome into my home, someone I could care for in his final years, but that's not the dad I have. I can care for him by ensuring he's in a good place, but as ever, my relationship with him needs boundaries, with space, distance, and benign neglect as our best path forward. I sit outside the memory care and sob as I wait for Rachel. When she comes out, she asks me, "Did you know your grandmother?" "No, she died long before I was born," I answer. "Well, she definitely verbally abused him," she said. "Did you see the way he cowered when I stood up to him and raised my voice? He was abused. I feel certain of it." And with that, I finally understand why my father spent so much of his life angry and yelling. So, thank you for indulging that long read. When I wrote this story, as I said at the beginning, the part that came first was the sleepover. The initial scene when I was 10 years old and my father yelled at me and in front of all my friends in the middle of the night, nearly naked in his tighty whities, and yelled at us to go to bed. And I spent hours that night, like, trying to integrate all of the parts of this essay. And then, like, it was the first time of what would go on to become many times that I sort of figured out what my brain was trying to tell me by writing down the parts and analyzing them. And I found the narrative arc I was looking for, which was, now I'm sending him to his room. And the cohesion of that, kind of, even rereading it to post this, like, blew my mind. Of course, that was such a powerful moment for me, both because I was the one in control. I didn't want to be in control of him, but I was. And it was this really stunning parallel between him sending me to my room for really no good reason other than to be angry and a bit cruel, and me sending him to his room because it was what he needed to care for him. And the story goes on to finish with a bit of an epilogue of the beauty of dementia is he has no memory of this, and he is content. He's now been there. It'll be 4 years this summer, and I will go visit him. And I have written a lot of stories about, like, many, many stories about what I've come to learn about him as he falls further into dementia and how his brain has come forward. But this was the first of them. And just rereading it and looking at the photos, I'm marveling that 3.5 years ago he could still walk, and how much more alert and with it he was. He has certainly declined cognitively and physically since then, but he is far more content. He's on meds to help manage his mood, and he's also just in a place where he feels safe, and there's a knowable routine that I think is really good for him. And so I am happy that he's there. I am happy that I get to continue this relationship with him at this distance. And he's still not necessarily the father that I wished for, but I am making do with the father that I have, and I have a sense of peace around that. And that is this story, and this is the dog treat. Can you have this? We're going to go a little while longer, so yes, she will have another treat. She's asking me to go outside, but um, Karen, thank you. I see your comment first here. What an incredible essay that connects the dots. Thank you. This one was grueling to write, and it was one of my earliest, best essays. It now appears, I think does this one appear in the Memoirs Quarterly? No, I think it was the one I posted last time. But I really do love this story. It was a joy to go back and revisit it and to be like, no notes. I still really like the story. When I wrote it, it was Father's Day weekend, and so you'll note at the end of the story, I wish him a happy Father's Day. I will probably put a note on it and reshare it in June, but I didn't want to wait to share it till then because this is an origin story for me. The first time I really started using my words to make sense of the relationship I have with my father. And that has been powerful, and I hope it's powerful for some of you. I am going to come back here. Oh my gosh, look how many folks are here. Hi, everybody. So glad you all are here. And I'm going to go back and read comments now and answer questions or speak to any of the comments that are in here. Karen says, memoirs require the right to bleed a little bit. Oh, that's beautifully stated. The writer has to bleed. Yes, I always say when I'm writing a proper memoir, I get coated in memoir dust. And when I'm writing about, I have a couple essays I've written about my grandparents, one in particular that's like, when I wrote it, it was like, for days, it was like I could smell my grandmother's perfume, and my grandfather's, like the way his breath smelled like onions after he would eat at the delicatessen, and I could hear his voice, and like I expected them to call me, and they've been dead. She died in 96, he died in 2010. Like they've been gone so long, and yet they felt right there. And this essay, yes, it required a lot of memoir dust to get back in that headspace, for sure. Hi, sweetie. My daughter's home. You hear a little noise, that's why. I'm going to go back and read some comments now and address them here. So Diane says, look up the Irish myths of Boan and Sinon. I'm going to cut and paste that, and I'm going to send it to myself right now because I will not remember those names, but are those about a father and a daughter? I'm interested to go see what those are. Thank you for your recommendation. Diane says, sounds like wading through murky waters. Your story reflects you having a well of deep empathy. Thank you. That's so nice of you to say. Let me see here. I see, never fear, grandma's here. Hi, you ready, grandma? I always love seeing your name pop up in the chats. And Karen says, holy cow, that's a huge slab of meat. Yes, the prime rib when we went out that night. And that was his final restaurant out. So I'm really glad it was like epic. And there was a giant baked potato too, and like this huge thing of like the most garlicky, buttery bread. And I think we got an ice cream sundae. Do you remember? Did we get an ice cream sundae then too? She thinks so. Like it was the most decadent meal. And I'm glad because we've brought him food there, but it's not the same thing. Let's see here. I'm scrolling up. There's a whole lot of hellos. And okay. My dad was great, but unfortunately my mother was not, and he had to constantly run interference with her, and that took him away from being just a great dad. I'm sorry, Karen. That is a hard way to grow up. But I'm glad that you had a great dad. That is wonderful. Shayla says, what a metaphor for how we're taught from a young age that our voices are not welcome. Yeah. The essay that I read last week about my dad, and I talk about how he came forward with the statement of like, I never hurt anyone. And I say, like, not all harm is physical. And the way that I was squelched as a kid absolutely limited me into adulthood. And it's taken a lot of work to become the feminist killjoy, I write out loud spitfire you see on camera today as a result. Let's see. Lynette says, Dana, I know these dads. I grew up near an Air Force base. I bet there are a lot of dads like that. I have no one military in my family, but again, in that last essay, my dad wishes he had served, and he now will tell you about how he served, which is thought based in reality. Noble says, I see other people's parents and realize how lucky I was to get the ones I have, especially in dads. My dad was amazing. Good. I'm really glad you had an amazing dad. Let me see here. Lynette says that her parents remodeled the basement with a game carpet so you could play chess and checkers and hopscotch. Oh, so you had like a special place where you could be loud and be a kid. I love that. And yeah, you said, now I know why my parents remodeled their basement for sleepovers. Exactly. Like my kids have had so many sleepovers here. And my rule for them is as long as you don't wake me up, you can do whatever you want and stay up all night. So it's not that there are no rules, but I would never, yeah. And I've gone down and been like, you're being too loud. But the idea, especially of a man in underwear screaming at a bunch of 10-year-old girls, not just screaming like, I'm angry and I need you to be quiet, but the actual like I'm unhinged and I'm coming at you with anger. There's a difference. Situational thing versus a like I'm not in control as the parent. I'm letting the anger rule me. That's us. I mean, that was how I grew up, and it's a scary feeling. So, phew. Um, Sushi says, missed the narrative, just tuned in, but if we were talking about dads, mine was and is one of the best fathers. Good. I don't want to brag, but I think my daughters have one of the best fathers too. So, um, it is wonderful. Dr. Mary says, memoir dust. I like that. Thank you. I do too. So Lynette says, I don't know him, but he reminds me of my husband's grandfather, gruff in the center, a softie, but a hard shell because he had a challenging life story too. Yes, I do. I do believe that now about my dad. I think that excuses a lot, but I also believe that lots of good people have hard starts and they figure out how to not be assholes, especially to their kids. So it's forgivable, but to a point, right? There's a point there where uh, taking ownership for how you behave in the world is important. And I would definitely say this was one of those cases where he really needed to learn how to deal with his own anger, and he never did. And it's better now because he's medicated and because of the dementia, which is a really strange thing to say that there's healing in dementia, but there really has been with him. I'm looking forward to seeing him next week. I'm hoping that there will be another story that comes forward. I think I've written now like 6 or 7 essays about just my dad on these trips where I go visit him. I feel like they'd be a good essay book pulled together, but let's put that as a future project. Note to self. I'm reading back through my notes here of, the generation. I made a note to myself here about like this being a generational trauma lens. On the Daily Whatever Show, my podcast that I run with Lawrence, my childhood best friend, we talk a lot about how Gen X is breaking generational trauma cycles. And my dad was a great example of someone who didn't. Like, assuming that what this nurse said was true and that his mother was at a minimum verbally abusive with him, and then he went on to be the same way, like that stopped here. Not to say I never raised my voice with my kids. I've got one of them home here right now to listen. But that cycle of living in a home where I was always walking on eggshells and felt like I could be in trouble. And there was this scary, dark parental presence that was just weighty. And none of us could sort of be peaceful at home. Like that cycle, I hope, has been broken. And I'm looking here at the other notes. The emotional work men of this generation didn't do. I've kind of spoken to that already. I do wish he had. I can only imagine how different my childhood would have been and our relationship would be and how different his life trajectory would be if things had been different. So yeah, it's a strange power shift that happens as our parents age, and especially when dementia is at play, that I think what's also clear in the story is that I had to become the parent, right? I had to be the one to make all of these decisions for him. And my brother is his power of attorney because, of course, why would the girl be the power of attorney? So he continues to make all the decisions for my dad, who can't make them. And it's I think that's a tale as old as time that will keep going because, we all start to fail as our bodies and our minds age, and we count on the generation younger than us to take the reins lovingly and on our behalf. So I hope my brother and I are living up to that with the care that we have shown him, even as our relationships with him are limited and a bit fraught. I would say that's probably a good concluding statement there of just maybe I didn't get the dad I wanted, but I did get I do get an increasing sense of clarity every time I see him, and I think that's been healing for me. I don't know that it's overtly healing for him, but I'd like to believe that if you believe there's some like soul in here that's sort of the witness to what's going on in our, meat sacks of bodies that lives on after us, that it's doing some processing on his behalf. He's somehow at some deep level aware of the processing he's doing. I don't know, but I know I'm aware of it, and I'm sharing stories out with all of you. So hopefully others are learning from uh, his cognitive journey and my witness to it. Um, let's see. It's interesting in the story you said he would take you to therapy when your friends split, and he did not take me to therapy. When my parents split, my mom took my brother and I to therapy, and I mentioned this in the story. I have no memory of it, which is weird because I was 17. I wasn't a kid. And apparently the therapist said things that made my mom really uncomfortable about, I don't even remember what she said now, but that we only went a few times and it did not go well. And she pulled us out. And I'm like, I have no recollection of that. But I do trust that my mom is a reliable narrator so that it happened. But yeah, my dad definitely would not have taken me. Karen says, my mom did that to our family, 2 daughters, but my brother, who was younger, was the power of attorney because, yes, women are less capable. Oh, of course. Of course. And don't get me wrong, I don't want the responsibility, so it is A-okay. I've kind of talked about all the things I want to talk about for this story. Oh, wait, no, I haven't. I have an epilogue that's a nod to tomorrow's story. So, within this story, as you may have heard, my dad and his wife had a little dog named Woody. And Woody, when my stepmom died, was 12 years old, was diabetic, incontinent, deeply fractious, just the angriest, yappiest, kind of, if he hadn't been blind, would have been dangerous dog. And in addition to all of these other responsibilities related to my father and the emotions around that, I was the one in town. My brother and his family were overseas when all of this happened. So I was talking to him, but I was like, don't fly back. They were on like an amazing trip through Scandinavia. But as a result, it fell to me to figure out what to do with Woody. And I didn't think there was going to be an option for Woody. And I was like, I don't know that I have the emotional bandwidth to put this dog down on top of everything else. And it's story, and it is going to be mine of what happened to Woody. And I wrote it because on Medium, when I first posted this story, one of the readers responded to it and said, but what happened to the dog? I know that's not the point of the story, but also I'm worried about the dog. And it is not a literary story. It is not poetic like this one, but it's such a good story. And that will be tomorrow. So we'll dive into that. If you come back tomorrow, it should be the same time, 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. here in the West Coast. And the article will go live at 8:08 a.m. Eastern time, like it always does, because 8 is my favorite number. And this is my 8th story in the Write Out Loud project. So this is a really meaningful one for me. I'm so happy that you all have been here to hear the story. And I see more notes have come in. Let me take a read here. Lynette said, Dana, I think the therapist wanted your mom to be a part of the therapy. Maybe. I don't know. It's all like somewhere buried in here, maybe. Maybe it was awful and I blocked it. I can't say. Jeannie says, my dad is broken, and when he shared the moment he broke, which is not something he is aware of, but it made life make sense with him. I forgave all that he does because he was broken, and no one has ever taken the time to heal him, not that he's self-aware. I'm sorry. That is really hard and really not that different, I'd say, from my own father. Oh, good. Ms. Hughes, that's a funny username. It says, I love the number 8. I'm a crazy 8. I may borrow that. I'm a crazy 8. Yeah, if you become, at the start of this, I shared the link to subscribe to support the I Write Out Loud project, and founding memberships cost $88. I kept them pretty price accessible, and also I just love 8s. So $88, and I'm hoping to gain 88 paid subscribers before I get to my 88th story. And once I hit 88, I will say this is a robust, this is a body of work. I have more than 88 stories to bring over, and I'm still writing new ones. But when I get to 88, I'll be like, fuck yeah, 88. We got a body of work here, people. But so I'm 1/11th of the way there. It's a long journey, and I'm very glad that you're on it with me. Nothing in the world makes me the same kind of happy that sharing these stories makes me, and I am loving sharing them. I love having you all as an audience. Thank you. If there's anything you can be in life, be a magic 8 ball. Okay, I can be a magic 8 ball. Thanks for my new daily self-care hour, Dana. Oh, thank you, Shayla. I was pondering today, I'm not sure what's going to happen next week because I am visiting, going to Florida. I'll be staying with my mom. I will be paying a visit to my dad. And I don't know, the Daily Whatever show will continue. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do 2 hours a day of lives 5 days a week while I'm only visiting for a week. So I'm gonna need to figure that out. I think I can get the 5 stories queued and ready, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to go live every day just because, it'll be a pretty big disruption in the day, and we're gonna wanna, go exploring and go to the beach and the pool and the Everglades and all the things. So stay tuned. Next week, the programming may be slightly different because I do need to prioritize seeing my family and checking in with them. Um, I just had the crazy thought of it would be wild to go live with my dad, but I don't know if that's fair to him because he wouldn't understand what he was doing. But maybe, you never know. Maybe I'll do that. Lynn says, "Oh, my oldest child was born on 8/18/89 and was 8 pounds, 8 ounces, 18 inches, and we recovered in room 208." That's crazy, Lynn. I was born at 208, so 208 is my ultimate favorite number. And my daughter also has, I'm not going to disclose her full birthday, but my eldest is all 8, almost all 8s, but was 7 pounds, 15 ounces. I was like, "Oh, 1 more ounce." Maybe the scale was wrong, but lots of 8s in her birthday as well. So, yeah, 8s are awesome, and you all are awesome, and I am going to sign off now. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for coming by, and I will see you same time and place tomorrow, and we are going to be talking about Woody, which maybe isn't as a grandiose a story as an origin story, but it is a brother-sister story to this one. I can't share one without sharing the other because it's the happy ending part of the story. So, I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. Love you all. Bye.